Welcome to the debate. Have you ever noticed that as our technology gets just exponentially smarter, the people walking down the street looking at it seem to be, well, struggling a bit more?
Yeah, it's a stark contrast, right?
It really is. Back in 2006, Mike Judge released this comedy called Idiocracy. It's about an average guy who wakes up 500 years in the future only to find that society has been profoundly, almost completely dumbed down.
And for years, we all just laughed at it. It was a lowbrow satire.
Exactly, just a funny movie. But today, we're diving into the source material around this concept to ask a much more unsettling question. Is Idiocracy actually a documentary?
Right.
Does it serve as this stark prophetic warning about dysgenetics, meaning the decline of civilizational competence due to, biological and mating incentives?
And that is the core of our discussion today.
Right. And I will be arguing that, yes, it is an empirically accurate warning. It shows exactly what happens when the actual builders of society simply stop reproducing.
And, well, I look at this from a very different perspective. I'm going to argue that using Idiocracy as a warning relies on a classic Mott and Bailey tactic.
Okay, explain that a bit.
Yeah, so I think it masks early 20th century eugenicist assumptions under the guise of just a harmless comedy. I believe the true threat to our civilization isn't biological determinism.
Or broken genetics.
Then what is it?
The real threat is the artificial, fiat-derived institutional structures we've built. These structures actively suppress human liberation, and frankly, they engineer artificial scarcity. Okay, so let's lay out our core positions for the listener. Because my position is really rooted in an observable, just mathematical reality. Pronatalists outbreed antinatalists.
Sure, the numbers show that.
Right. But we have to look deeper at the incentives driving those numbers. Right now, people who treat sex and relationships as a reproductive tool, so to speak, are being vastly outpaced by those who treat them as a recreational toy.
A toy. Okay.
Yeah. It creates what we could call a toy factory society. And I think it perfectly explains our current economic paradox. Consumer electronics, the toys, they just plummet in price. But absolute civilizational necessities, like housing, energy, medical care,
they skyrocket.
Exactly. They become unaffordable. So the competent class, the engineers, the builders, the planners, they're delaying family formation to manage this massive burden.
Right.
Which creates a truly dysgenic reality. You have a shrinking, competent minority being forced to maintain this increasingly automated, massive welfare state for a growing majority.
I understand the appeal of that narrative. It's very neat. But I just don't buy it. Let me explain why I called this a Mott and Bailey argument earlier.
Go ahead.
So in debate, a Mott and Bailey is when you make this highly controversial claim. That's the Bailey. But when someone challenges you, you retreat to a very safe, obvious claim, the Mott.
Like a castle defense.
Exactly. So the film is frequently used to push this eugenics-adjacent worldview, quietly labeling certain groups of people as genetically unfit. That's the controversial Bailey.
But nobody is openly saying we should implement eugenics.
Right, because when people get called out on it, they retreat to the Mott. They say, oh, no, I just mean smart people should have more kids. But by blaming individuals and their raw genetics, you completely ignore fundamentally systemic failures.
Systemic failures like what, though?
Like the fact that we have erected these completely fiat-derived status hierarchies. We have artificial barriers. Look at massive overcriminalization, or intellectual property laws that allow corporations to just leech off decades-old innovations, blocking new builders.
But how does that affect mating?
Because these systems impose an artificial suffering mandate on the population. We are infantilizing people through academic and corporate autocracies. We aren't allowing natural human competence to actually flourish.
I see why you think the system is the primary culprit, but to understand the divergence between what you're calling systemic design and what I view as genetic destiny, I really think we have to examine the base evolutionary strategies.
Okay, let's get into the biology.
Yeah, let's break it down. In evolutionary psychology, there are essentially two reproductive strategies: Think of them simply. We have our selected strategies, which are basically opportunistic.
The quantity over quality approach.
Right, the pump and dump approach. And then we have key selected strategies. This involves heavy investment in a few offspring, where individuals really stick it out and build resources.
Right. Those are pretty standard ecological models, usually applied to how different species reproduce based on environmental stability.
Exactly. And in humans, this creates these really profound behavioral paradoxes. Historically, men exchange their long-term commitment for a partner's purity and fidelity. But, and here is the catch, they will readily sacrifice that requirement for an easy, opportunistic encounter.
The R-selected echo, yeah.
Right. And conversely, women exchange their reproductive opportunity for a man's status and security. But they will sacrifice the demand for long-term commitment if the man's status is phenomenally high.
Okay, I follow the model.
So in a dysgenic society, the environment stops demanding the case-selected stick-it-out strategy. We end up with a system where decentralized polygyny and opportunistic mating completely decouple from the actual long-term needs of raising capable progeny. The result? Fewer builders, more dependents.
It is a compelling biological framing, I'll give you that. But let me offer a different angle. Have you considered modeling this through game theory?
Game theory instead of evolutionary psych?
Yeah, because we don't need to resort to biological fatalism. Imagine a market of cooperators and fakers. You can look at classic models like the hawk-dove game or the prisoner's dilemma.
Right.
Or even those complex cellular automatons academics use. There's one simulation that features 4 male strategies. You have Adam, who is always truthful, Cain, who actively protects and repairs delusion,
Oh, right.
Bo, who just agrees fully and lies, and David, who specially flatters. In a purely natural, rugged state, the true cooperators, like Adam, the men who actually build shelter and gather food, they went out over generations.
Because their tangible repair of the world ensures their offspring actually survive.
Yes, historically, the true builders win the mating game. But today, the fakers, the opportunists like the Hawks or Bo or David, they dominate, initially.
Why? What changed?
What I mentioned earlier, fiat-derived status. Modern financial and social systems allow men to basically buy the Garden of Eden on credit.
Wow. Buy the Garden of Eden on credit?
Exactly. It's like bringing monopoly money to a real estate auction. The evolutionary brain of a woman assessing a mate cannot distinguish between a debt-financed luxury lifestyle and actual hard-won provisioning ability. They bypass the true work.
That's a fascinating analogy, the monopoly money. But, doesn't that inherently prove my point?
How so?
Let's use an evolutionary reward analogy. Think about the theological concept we sometimes see in these analyses, the idea that Jesus suffered maximally for minimal sin to provide salvation. Traditionally, there was a similar suffering mandate for sons to achieve status.
Right, a man had to toil outside in the elements, face danger.
Build infrastructure, exactly. He had to suffer outside heaven to earn access to the reproductive garden. Now, if modern men can use your metaphorical monopoly money to simulate the fruits of that suffering without actually doing the physical or intellectual work,
Yeah.
and women accept that fake money, doesn't that mean our biological filters are fundamentally broken? Women are selecting for fake signals, which validates the exact warning of idiocracy. The filters fail, competence drops, society collapses.
No, I have to stop you there because the filters aren't broken.
They're not?
They are functioning exactly as evolution designed them to. They are just being actively hacked by artificial economic structures. When you say the biological filters are broken, you are placing the blame on the raw genetics of the population.
Well, the outcomes are genetic.
But that is where the eugenics undertone creeps in. I am saying the system is pumping counterfeit signals into the environment. It overstimulates female hypergamy, that biological drive to seek the most capable provider, without actually delivering real security. It's an institutional failure, not a genetic one.
Okay, well, let's follow that into the modern economy then. Because I think looking at how the market commodifies these evolutionary mismatches is crucial.
Let's do it.
If men are buying fake status and women's filters are being hacked, as you say, we should see that reflected digitally. And we absolutely do. Look at the rise of platforms like OnlyFans and TikTok.
The ultimate digital decoupling.
Right. It represents the complete decoupling of sex from reproduction. You have platforms where women provide anonymous, parasocial intimacy while simultaneously expressing deep social anger and frustration on other platforms like TikTok.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, men are laboring in the real physical economy just to funnel their wages to these creators. They're hoping their financial devotion, their simping, for lack of a better word, magically promotes them to a stud status in the creator's eyes.
Yes. Capitalism finds the unmet biological need and monetizes it ruthlessly.
Right, but look at the actual result on the ground. It creates an artificial inflation of mating standards. We call it hoflation.
Ah, the artificial abundance?
Exactly. You hear about these digital checklists, the 666 rule. A man must be 6 feet tall, make 6 figures, have a six-pack. Because of the sheer illusion of digital abundance, a woman's baseline standards artificially inflate.
But that's performative.
Is it? She might act highly masculine and aggressive in her career goals to signal responsibility to the hive mind of her peers. But we constantly see that she will immediately pause this trajectory when she is validated by an ostentatious high-status man.
Okay, let me give you a completely different perspective on that behavior.
Sure.
The reason women participate in this performative, checklist-driven game is because society has heavily moralized and essentially criminalized their most advantageous biological strategy.
Seeking a provider?
Yes, we tell women that seeking resources or statuses is shallow, it's evil. So women are forced into this massive ego preservation mechanism.
Oh, interesting.
They have to say, I have these impossible standards because I am independent and special, rather than just admitting they are looking for baseline evolutionary security. Furthermore, your economic framing misses how deep this exploitation really goes.
How so?
Think about the service industry, tipped jobs, or even the broader social concept of the friend zone. These are essentially personal validation employment agencies.
Validation employment agencies?
Yeah. They are capitalist extensions of deferred desire. Women aren't just acting out some flawed genetic script. They are surviving in a system that literally monetizes their attention and beauty.
Okay, but
And it exposes a massive societal delusion. The idea that men are instinctively built to perform soul-crushing manual labor merely in the presence of female beauty. Women objectifying undesirable men for attention while complaining about being objectified themselves. That exposes a hyper-capitalist market distortion, not a genetic failing.
Okay, that's a very fair critique of the market mechanics. But I really want to push back on the biology of the ego you just mentioned.
Go for it.
Consider the biological concept of pregnancy as a woman's absolute biggest ego killer. From an evolutionary standpoint, pregnancy floods the body with hormones that radically reset a woman's focus.
Right, it grounds her.
It shifts her from external validation, her ego, her peer group, her digital 666 checklist, to a deep, purely biological commitment to her progeny.
It forces a realignment with physical reality.
Exactly. So, if pregnancy is the natural reset button that grounds humans back in civilizational reality, doesn't the modern widespread delay or avoidance of this biological reset artificially prolong the toy factory society?
I see what you're saying.
we are effectively living in an extended adolescence. And isn't that delay directly causing the plummeting birth rates and civilizational decline that Idiocracy warns us about? The competent people are literally aging out of the window where we build the future.
But it's not the delay of pregnancy itself that is driving the decline. It is the fact that the institutions required to support family formation have been completely captured.
Captured by who?
By autocrats. They've been turned into autocracies. If you want to see where this commodification of validation and this delay of adulthood happens most egregiously, just look at our primary institutions of learning and gatekeeping, the modern university system.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up universities, because I completely agree they are ground zero for this, but I see the mechanism very differently.
Okay, how do you see it?
I look at the modern university as a sort of Lion King dynamic, a medieval castle. In the modern university, women heavily dominate the unscalable ideological fields. Activism and grievance studies have essentially become professionalized complaining.
Right, they dominate the social hierarchies.
They are the nobility in the castle. Meanwhile, the men who don't fit the high-status, ostentatious criteria are relegated to the tangible STEM fields. They are in the moat.
doing the heavy lifting.
Doing the grueling work to build the infrastructure, like the very apps, servers, and platforms used to monetize the sexual capital we just talked about. And at the top of the castle, a few high-status alpha administrative managers sit in defensive positions, protecting the pride and the endowment.
Well, the taxpayer subsidizes it.
Exactly. Taxpayer money subsidizes this entire pipeline, effectively forcing young women into debt serfdom while extracting all the productive labor of the builders in the moat.
See, you are perfectly describing the symptom, but you are still misdiagnosing the disease. What you are describing is institutional capture, not dysgenics.
But the result is dysgenic.
It's an academic autocracy. The university is a hive mind placating its drones with honey. Subsidized loans, great inflation, social signaling. It does this to prevent true self-liberation and actual rugged competence.
It is a velvet-gloved autocracy, yes.
Honestly, I would rather have my head blown off by a hostile, super-intelligent robot than be perpetually infantilized by flesh and blood university administrators.
Okay, that's a strong visual. So if the genetics aren't the core problem and the university autocracy is, how do we actually fix it?
The solution isn't to bemoan human genetics or birth rates. The solution is to completely dismantle the human gatekeepers. We need immutable, closed-loop AI and blockchain lock systems.
Wait, like smart contracts?
Yes, specifically smart contracts for property, credentialing, and hiring.
I need to stop you there. I want to make sure the listener really understands this leap. How does an AI reviewing a resume or a blockchain contract stop a society from collapsing due to plunging birth rates and massive incompetence?
It's all connected.
Connect the dots for me, because right now it sounds like a technological Band-Aid on a biological wound.
It connects perfectly because it removes the fiat-derived monopoly money from the system.
Okay.
Let me explain how it works. Right now, a human hiring manager or university admissions officer uses human bias. They look for performative virtue signaling, the right school name on the resume, the right ideological buzzwords. That is fake status.
True.
If we use AI automated gatekeeping governed by transparent smart contracts, we strip all of that away instantly. The system would enforce true competence. Can you code? Can you build? Can you solve the math?
Without the politics.
Without any human bias or agenda-driven discontinuation. It forces both the mating market and the economic market to relink survival and status to actual, undeniable competence.
I hear the logic. I really do. But I am incredibly skeptical that human nature will allow that to work in practice. Let's look at a radical thought experiment found in some of the literature analyzing these exact societal structures.
Which one?
The proposal of a chaste female hive university model.
Oh, right.
Imagine a system where institutions deliberately strip sexuality and mating out of the equation entirely. They function almost like a secular convent, sworn chaste maidens offering shelter to single mothers or post-war women in exchange for loyalty. Pure intellectual focus, no mating distraction.
A forced separation of the mating market from the intellectual market.
Yes, but my question to you is, wouldn't human biological nature eventually rebel against such an austere coded system, whether it's a chaste hive or your AI blockchain?
Why would it rebel?
Look at our closest primate relatives. Look at bonobo, matrilineal inheritance networks. They constantly use sociosexual behavior, grooming, bonding, favors, to build coalitions and ease tension. You cannot just code away human mating imperatives with a smart contract. We are biological creatures. We will inevitably bypass the code to get to the validation.
But you don't need to code away the imperative. You just need to remove the fiat-derived distortion so the biological imperative naturally aligns with merit again. Women want to choose competent men, but if we want to talk about raw biological fuel and how to actually harness it, we have to address male drive.
Let's absolutely do that, because I think male drive is the raw fuel of civilizational maintenance.
It is.
There's a concept we should unpack. Let's call it the testosterone ratio, or the 381W analogy. Men possess roughly 10 to 20 times the testosterone of women.
Right, a massive biological difference.
To oversimplify for the sake of analogy, if you have 19 men doing the actual physical, dangerous, structural work of a society, and they are protected by one high-status alpha male organizing the property, it requires an immense amount of raw, aggressive drive to keep that civilization from collapsing. Basically, 381 women's worth of drive.
That's the math, yeah.
Men will move mountains, dig tunnels, burn cities, or frankly, metaphorically eat dog do for the prospect of sex. The rule of history is painfully simple. When women reward the mountain movers, civilization thrives.
And when they don't?
When the mating market rewards performative slackers, city burners, or poop-eating hippies, civilization decays into idiocracy.
And you're touching on the exact reason why I look at the concept of universal basic income, UBI, very differently than most people.
How so? UBI is usually seen as the ultimate enabler of the slackers.
Right. Critics of UBI argue that it is merely a bribe to prevent revolution. They say it's designed to pacify this massive glut of average, undesirable men whose unutilized testosterone builds up dangerously during times of economic stagnation.
Exactly. It's a pacifier for the surplus men in the moat, to use our earlier analogy.
But consider the flip side. Think about the mechanics of a truly automated future. If AI and robotics genuinely end the 40-hour work week, competent men, who historically have much simpler material tastes than women, could easily meet their baseline survival needs with just 5 hours of work a week.
Assuming housing and energy costs magically drop, which is a big if.
Assuming the artificial fiat scarcity is removed, yes. Freed from that massive survival debt, this surplus of male testosterone and dopamine wouldn't just vanish into thin air.
What would it do?
It could trigger an unprecedented innovation revolution. Men wouldn't be grinding at pointless middle management jobs to pay off exorbitant student loans. And they wouldn't be funneling their meager wages to digital parasocial platforms. They would be inventing, building, exploring. They would return to being mountain movers because they actually have the time and freedom to do so.
That is a fascinating and, frankly, beautiful utopian vision. But here is where it completely falls apart for me. And it brings us right back to the dysgenics argument.
Okay, let's hear it.
The current system shows us that women are highly addicted to the comforts of the world that men built. The HVAC systems, the logistics networks, the internet infrastructure, but they generally lack the raw testosterone and drive to maintain those specific physical infrastructures willingly on their own.
We are a dimorphic species, yes. We have different general distributions of labor and interests.
Right. So if UBI is implemented, giving everyone baseline survival, but the underlying mating market continues to be broken.
Meaning?
If female mate choice continues to reward performative toys over the actual tools of mountain moving, won't UBI simply subsidize the destruction of society? Won't it just subsidize the city burners?
I don't think so.
How can an innovation revolution occur if the very men freed by UBI are still biologically incentivized by women to act like opportunists and performative slackers? They will just use their free time to play the digital status game on TikTok rather than building rocket ships.
Because you are assuming the mating market will remain forever distorted by fiat wealth. You are assuming the filters will stay hacked.
I think human nature keeps them hacked.
But if we implement the AI gatekeeping we discussed, if we radically reform intellectual property laws so corporations can't leech off outdated royalties, and if we end the overcriminalization that ruins the lives of lower status men, we strip away all those counterfeit signals.
You think confidence will just shine through?
Yes. Competence becomes highly visible again. When survival debt is gone, and the fake status signals are completely dismantled, female hypergamy will naturally realign. It will recalibrate to reward the men who are actually moving mountains.
Well, it is a profound disagreement, and I think it gets to the very heart of how we fundamentally view human nature.
It really does.
To summarize my position as we wrap up here, I maintain that idiocracy is not some eugenicist dog whistle. It is an empirical, observable warning about dysgenics.
Right.
As long as our modern environment allows our evolutionary wants, meaning digital validation for women and cheap, opportunistic sexual access for men, to be satisfied at the direct expense of our civilizational needs, which are deep commitment and investment in the future, the decline will just continue.
The toy factory.
Exactly. The toy factory society will continue to outbreed the builders. The competent class will continue to shrink under the weight of the system, and eventually the mountains will simply stop being moved.
And I conclude that attributing our civilizational decline to genetic destiny is, frankly, a dangerous scapegoat. It actively ignores the eugenicist undertones of the argument, and it blames human biology when the true culprits are entirely man-made.
The structures.
Yes. The real enemies of competence are fiat-derived hierarchies, outdated intellectual property regimes, and these academic autocracies that stifle natural human drive and infantilize the public. We entirely agree that the system is broken.
We do.
But I believe immutable technologies like AI gatekeeping, combined with an innovation revolution freed from survival debt, can actually tear down the autocracies and restore genuine meritocracy.
Well, we certainly share a deep, fundamental agreement that modern mating incentives and economic realities are severely, perhaps perilously, decoupled from the long-term health of our civilization.
Absolutely. Whether the ultimate threat is a dysgenic collapse of human intelligence or the total institutional infantilization of the masses, the material we've explored today holds far more philosophical depth than just a simple comedy from 2006 would suggest.
That's for sure.
I think there is a tremendous amount here for listeners to continue to unpack and debate on their own.
Indeed. At the start of this discussion, we talked about how comforting it is to look at a collapsing society and just blame the obvious surface-level structures. But when we look at the foundation of our civilization, we find that the cracks aren't just in the concrete of our institutions. They run through the very biology of our choices and the mating markets we participate in every single day.
The choices we make matter.
They do. The question remains, are we designing a new blueprint to build better systems, or have we simply stopped breeding the engineers who know how to read them? Thank you for joining us on The Debate.